A pair of Jacks. One of the first things that happens when I talk about Texas Jack is that someone inevitably asks, didn't he ride with Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday on their Vendetta ride? No, Texas Jack Omohundro didn't fight side by side with the Earp brothers, Wyatt and Warren, and their friends Doc Holliday, Sherman McMaster, and Turkey Creek Jack Johnson in Tombstone, because Omohundro had been dead for over a year before the shootout at the OK Corral and subsequent Vendetta ride ever started. The man that rode with Earp was another, later Texas Jack, a man by the name of Jack Vermillion, perhaps best remembered as portrayed by Peter Shirayko in the movie Tombstone. Even if we accept that the Tombstone, Arizona-based Texas Jack was Jack Vermillion, there's been some argument as to which Jack Vermillion he was. For years, Western aficionados believed the man to be John Wilson Vermillion, a Confederate Civil War veteran who fought under the commands of General Joseph Wheeler and Nathan Bedford Forrest before migrating first to Missouri, then Kansas, and finally to the silver boomtown of Tombstone, Arizona. More recently, author Peter Brand's book, Wyatt Earp's Vendetta Posse Rider, The Story of Texas Jack Vermillion, has put forth John Oberlin Vermillion, who fought for the Union in the Civil War before drifting to Texas, Louisiana, and on to Tombstone, as perhaps more likely candidate. Brand makes a pretty convincing argument that the man known as Texas Jack Vermillion, and later as Shoot Your Eye Out Vermillion, was John O. rather than John W. Vermillion, who was a retiring Methodist preacher who died in 1911. In Tombstone, when a reporter asked Vermillion why his friends called him Texas Jack, he responded simply, "Because I'm from Virginia." What might seem like a simple joke makes more sense when we place Vermillion, Texas Jack Omohundro, and Tombstone, Arizona in context. By the time of the OK Corral shootout in 1881 and the following year's Vendetta ride, Texas Jack Omohundro had been dead for a year, but he was far from forgotten. Over the preceding decade, not only had Omohundro become one of the most famous men in America, but his cognomen had become a kind of shorthand for a certain kind of wide-brimmed wearing, six-shooter wielding, whiskey-drinking Western man. Newspapers were filled with stories of wannabe Texas Jacks, including, quote, a Texas Jack of 13, end quote, in a Washington, D.C. paper in 1878, and a, quote, Texas Jack of South Boston, quote, in that city's papers a few years earlier. Thousands had seen Omohundro on stage, whether with Buffalo Bill Cody and Wild Bill Hickok, or in his own combination with his famous wife, Giuseppina Morlicki. Many more had read about the real Texas Jack in newspaper stories from his time on the frontier up until his death, or in the hundreds of Texas Jack dime novels written by Ned Buntline, Prentice Ingraham, and later by Bill Cody himself. So Vermillion's joke might be best understood as, they call me Texas Jack because, like Texas Jack, I'm from Virginia. Other Texas Jack would soon follow, including Dick Broadwell, alias John Moore, alias Texas Jack, who rode with and died with most of the rest of the Dalton gang when they tried to rob two banks at once on October 5, 1892. Later came Nathaniel Texas Jack Reed, a reformed bank robber and desperado who left his life of crime after being shot and turned himself over to a judge in 1894. Reed wrote a book called The Life of Texas Jack, 8 years a criminal, 41 years trusting in God, and he spent most of his life touring with various carnivals and Wild West shows as Texas Jack, the famous bandit and train robber. He tried to interest Hollywood studios in his story unsuccessfully up until his death in 1950. While he failed to capture the ears of studio execs during his lifetime, a movie about Reed, starring Trace Adkins, and called Stagecoach, The Texas Jack Story, was released in 2016.